mshikamano viwe msingi wa umoja wetu, na tulinde uhuru na amani, mila zetu na desturi zetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu. Viwandani na hata mashambani, tufanye kazi sote kwa makini, tujitoe kwa hali na mali, tuijenge jumuiya bora. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Please do take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. The Honorable Minister in charge of general duties in the office of the Prime Minister, and also in charge of the SDG implementations. And the Honorable, okay, I had not concluded with introducing the Honorable Mary Karoro Krut. And the Honorable Miriam Mateme raised a very critical issue, and I think we need to dedicate this report to God. So the Honorable Miriam, please come and pray for us. Since I know you love God, so please come and pray for us. We'll stay where we are and as we are, and let's pray. Please come.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's humble ourselves and pray. Our loving God in heaven, we stand here in your presence to give you praise and honor and thank you. We acknowledge your power, acknowledge your love, your protection, and our guidance. Lord, we thank you. We are here to launch out a report on how COVID has impacted on us. But we want to thank you that despite this COVID thing, we are still here. You are in charge and you are in control. We thank you for all the work that has been done through your people to keep us safe. And we commit today's proceedings into your hands. And the panelists, everybody. And we ask for wisdom and knowledge to be able to understand what you want us to do, so that even after discussing this report and launching it, each of us will know that we have a role to play in improving the status of your people, COVID notwithstanding. Thank you. We have prayed. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm a bit careful. She's my seatmate, or at least tablemate. And so I needed to know that when I go back to my seat, I will be safe. So the Honorable Minister of State in charge, the Honorable Minister in charge of general duties in the office of the Prime Minister, and also in charge of the SDG implementation, and also here with us is the Minister of State for Finance, Planning and Economic Development, and he's just joined us, the Honorable Dr. Jedra Gabriel Aridru. Your Excellency, the UN Resident Coordinator, Ms. Rosa Malango, the Resident Representative of the UNDP in Uganda, Elsie Atafa, the Country Representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization Uganda, Dr. Querido Antonio, the UN Women Country Representative, Maxime Hunatu, and the Chief of Mission, IOM, Senusi Savage. We want to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. On behalf of the United Nations in Uganda and on behalf of the UN family, we want to welcome you to this launch of the Uganda COVID-19 Impact Report. If you're joining us on television, on NTV Uganda, and you're also watching online via Zoom or the social media platforms of UN in Uganda and UNDP and NTV Uganda. Please use the hashtag COVID-19 Impact or UNUG SDGs Month. Those two hashtags we'll be using today, and you can tag at UN in Uganda and at UNDP Uganda, and we'll share this conversation. So I want to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, to this launch. May I now invite Her Excellency, Ms. Rosa Malango, to make her welcome remarks. You're most welcome, Your Excellency.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God, I know we're offering breakfast. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. We wanted to make sure that everybody is comfortable and with us on this very important occasion. I want to thank the MC for a very nice and appropriate opening for this definitely, from our perspective, a historical event. The Honorable Minister for General Duties, Office of the Prime Minister, and National Focal Point for the Sustainable Development Goals in the Republic of Uganda. The Honorable Minister of State from the Ministry of Finance, Your Excellencies, the Ambassadors, and Heads of Cooperation following online, esteemed colleagues from the UN system, particularly the UNCT members, recognizing UN Women, IOM, who are here present with me, and a particular warm thanks to UNDP for its technical leadership on this event. I want to recognize the members of the private sector, the academia, the media fraternity, as well as FAO, how could I forget food, who are here present with us. Distinguished viewers, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. On behalf of the United Nations system in Uganda, I am honored to convey our deep appreciation for your participation today as we launch the joint United Nations report on the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 in Uganda. So let me begin by conveying thanks. The United Nations commends the government of Uganda for the appropriate measures implemented to curb the spread of the deadly COVID-19. We commend President Yoweri Museveni for his personal leadership and the commitment to preventing the spread and responding to COVID-19 in Uganda. We would also like to thank all development partners for supporting both the government and the United Nations, enabling us to respond to COVID-19 and its impact on the most vulnerable. Ladies and gentlemen, the emergence of COVID-19, which the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic on 11 March 2020, has adversely affected every continent, territory, and region around the world. On 21 March, Uganda confirmed her first case, and since then, cases have been on the rise, well managed. The unprecedented health threat of COVID-19, the likes of which the world had not seen for over 100 years, has had health effects which are clear. However, the unintended consequences of the pandemic, which we are just beginning to understand, are just as dangerous. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has noted that exceptional times require exceptional solidarity and has called on UN country teams around the world to step up, adapt, and adjust in order to support member states in the fight against COVID-19, as well as in their definition of efforts to protect and recover development gains. We, the United Nations in Uganda, reprogrammed and adjusted our way of work in order to stay and deliver both humanitarian and development assistance during the lockdown. Throughout the lockdown, we continued assistance to refugees, we continued our support in health, nutrition, food security, the fight against gender-based violence, as well as we gave support to enhance the safe entry points both on land and at the international airports. We have also worked on an analysis of the potential socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 preventive measures on the most vulnerable. 12 United Nations agencies, funds, and programs have contributed to this analysis, which indicates that an estimated 4.4 million informal sector workers will either lose or see their earnings fall below the poverty line as a result of COVID-19. In addition, our analysis indicates the increased likelihood that the impact will amplify public debt as the government tries to find resources to respond to the implications. I want to take this opportunity to thank UNDP for leading this effort successfully on my behalf. It is our hope that this high-quality report will become a critical body of reference as Uganda develops interventions to recover from COVID-19. We believe that our analysis provides critical insight to help Uganda as it redefines strategies, initiatives, and plans, including the National Development Plan 3, in order to attain sustainable development, maintain peace, and build a more resilient society and economy. Ladies and gentlemen, our analysis is part of local content and is also part of local knowledge. I believe we can all agree that the outbreak of COVID-19 and the measures required to contain its impact on human life have had severe implications for millions of Ugandans who have lost their incomes, their livelihoods, and in many cases, access to critical social services. Like many other African countries, Uganda's economy is dominated by informal micro and small enterprises that contribute 85% of the total employment outside agriculture and over 50% to the national income. Ugandans working in the informal sector, especially those in manufacturing, hospitality, retail, and services, are among the worst affected, and this segment includes women and youth. The ongoing situation has serious implications for Uganda's journey towards the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished viewers, during this year's United Nations Socio-Economic Forum on financing sustainable development in the context of COVID, the UNSG made a call to adopt large-scale and comprehensive response to tackle the devastating socioeconomic consequences and to focus on the most vulnerable countries and people. What this translates to in our reality in Uganda is that we need to urgently take measures to support workers and households which target both formal and informal sectors. We need to scale up social protection and help businesses prevent severe job losses. In this regard, allow me to once again recognize the government's efforts on this front, especially the dialogues with partners led by the Ministry of Finance, which have informed national initiatives and incentives aimed at stimulating the economy and addressing the needs of the most vulnerable. However, more needs to be done. Allow me to mention some of the critical measures that need to be undertaken. First, as most of those hardest hit are informally employed youth and women with limited access to formal financial services, we need to design a microfinancing credit facility to support micro and small enterprises. As part of our commitment as a United Nations system to complement the government's efforts, we are proud to announce we are in the final stages with Stanbic to set up an economic enterprise restart fund that will target micro, small, and medium enterprises through savings and credit cooperative organizations known as SACCOs and village savings and loan associations. We have also partnered with Stanbic to establish the Youth for Business Innovation and Entrepreneurship Facility, and we look forward to scaling up both facilities with the support of our partners. Second, we need to fully promote safe digital solutions in all aspects of life. including making financial transactions more efficient and affordable. Evidence shows that mobile money is the major means of financial transactions for micro and small enterprises. However, the current tax regime on mobile money services and other digital services has made this channel very expensive, denying the country of the potential gains of an increased use of digital solutions and increasing challenges for micro and small enterprises, hence affecting women and youth. As the United Nations, we have partnered with Jumia and Save Border to link market vendors to e-commerce platforms as part of our efforts to increase the use of digital solutions to reduce the digital divide in Uganda. Third, we encourage the government to continue its efforts to identify and meet the basic needs of the most vulnerable, including those rapidly falling into poverty, by designing a rapid social protection plan in collaboration with development partners. These efforts need to be guided by a human rights-based approach, informed by disaggregated data by gender and age, and complemented by the establishment as a physical automated platform for coordination and resource mobilization. Last but not least, as Uganda continues to manage sharp economic downturns and the strain that COVID-19 has placed on the health sector, it is important to ensure the continuity of essential health services and achieve universal health coverage. There is need to identify modalities to increase domestic resources to deliver universal access to health services, increase access to learning, and protect livelihoods. In this context, it is important to guarantee the use of the unprecedented financial support that has been made available by citizens, private sector partners, and the government to protect households, the health system, the education platforms, and the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, before I conclude, allow me to share a call to action. We must start reflecting on how to strengthen the country's capacity to respond to shocks, including health pandemics and natural disasters. We call on the government to leverage the coordination mechanisms and information platforms established to respond to COVID-19 that have worked from district to the executive levels, in close coordination with Ugandan citizens and international partners, to please use this to facilitate the implementation of the third National Development Plan and the SDGs. In this spirit, through the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, which was recently launched by His Excellency the President, the UN system in Uganda will continue to work in solidarity with the government and people of Uganda to address the challenges posed by the pandemic and define inclusive, sustainable solutions that will enable Uganda to build back better. Let me conclude by emphasizing 2 points. First, with the current disruptions to the global logistical systems, the role of regional integration in development and sustaining peace has become even more important. The second edition of the Africa Regional Integration Index, a joint publication made by the UN Economic Commission for Africa, the African Development Bank, and the African Union Commission, found that the most integrated African economies are also the continent's strongest economies. It adds that the most pressing concern holding back regional integration on the continent is the slow production systems that do not complement each other. It calls on countries to enhance production, distribution, and marketing systems so as to build innovative regional value chains in different sectors of our economies and across our borders. Recent investment by Uganda in rolling out the Rwenzori agri-led approach represents an opportunity to ensure that Uganda's policies, strategies, and interventions are aligned to regional and continental opportunities, especially those related to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Second, we must ensure that all support measures target the poor, the most vulnerable, and the marginalized. The United Nations commits to scaling up its collaboration with the government, national human rights institutions, civil society, leaders of industry, and other stakeholders to make available disaggregated data and inclusive platforms to facilitate access to those normally left behind. In this regard, we have recently embarked on the 1 Million SDG Solutions Innovation Challenge in order to identify young people with potential solutions which can be scaled up in response to development challenges. This SDG platform is expected to stay open in order to give visibility to youth with solutions during this last decade of action to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to convey my heartfelt appreciation to all the UN representatives, managers, experts, staff, and partners who made this analysis possible. This has made Uganda one of the first countries out of 193 to meet the call of the UN Secretary General around the world. I invite Ugandans and partners to read our recommendations and join our journey to maintain this analysis alive as Uganda builds a new economy and transforms its society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the welcome remarks. As I introduced some of the representatives of the UN family in Uganda, I did skip UNICEF, so I want to recognize the presence of Laura Fauci, the officer in charge at UNICEF. You're most welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. That is not enough, surely, for all the work UNICEF is doing here. Okay, thank you. It now gives me great pleasure to invite the Honorable America Rook-Root, the Minister in charge of General Duties and also in charge of the SDG implementations, to come and make opening remarks. You're welcome, Honorable.
Good morning. It's unfortunate that we never see the smiles behind the masks. Honorable Ministers, Minister actually, I can see on my brother here, Honorable Jedra, the Resident Coordinator, Your Excellency Rosa Madango, Your Excellencies, heads of UN agencies, and in the interest of time, I stand in the protocol that has already been observed, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored this morning to represent the Right Honorable Prime Minister, who was invited as the guest of honor. I am honored to represent him to this very symbolic meeting that has been dedicated to the launch of a comprehensive social economic impact assessment on COVID-19. The assessment indeed leaves no one behind and encompasses all sectors of our economy and social fabric. I commend the United Nations and its agencies for this great undertaking. You may wish to give them a hand of applause. Since its declaration as a public health emergency of international concern on 30th January 2020, the COVID-19 outbreak has continued to spread and affect more people worldwide. Uganda has not been an exception, hence the timeliness of this deliverable. You will recall that Uganda registered her index case on the 21st of March 2020. With effect from 18th March 2020 and over a period of a few weeks, His Excellency President Yoweri Museveni had announced 35 directives aimed at preventing and controlling the spread of COVID-19 in the country. He later announced a total lockdown of the country effective 1st April 2020. And as you all know, the purpose of the lockdown was to suppress transmission by reducing the number of people undetected yet positive in the community. I would like to point out that we have been reading and hearing a lot of comments from social media and among the public about the effects of the measures that we undertook before and following the confirmation of the first positive case in Uganda. The comments have tended to suggest that the measures that were taken to prevent the spread of the disease, of the pandemic, have achieved nothing and only had significant negative effects on the social and economic lives of our people. While it is true that there were undesirable effects caused by these selective measures, the bigger picture on saving lives was by and large realized. With the systematic lifting of the lockdown, Uganda has continued to register a growing number of local transmission of COVID-19, creating a massive and unprecedented public health concern to the response, further complicated by a big burden on laboratory testing, personal protective equipment, and clinical care resources for those infected and affected. In addition, there is a growing number of health worker infections, with cases reported both in public health facilities and private health facilities. The government of Uganda and the global community are increasingly aware of the importance of research and rapid assessments, social and economic needs. However, research activities and rapid assessments cannot be considered complete until the results have been made widely available. And it is in this spirit that I greatly commend the United Nations family that have taken off time and resources to undertake a comprehensive impact assessment and gone ahead to make the findings and results available to us through the launch that we are witnessing today. Another round of applause, please. Thank you so much, UN family. Findings from this assessment will go a long way in determining the vital aspects that will support timely and effective prevention and the control of the pandemic in a sustainable and integrated approach. The onset of the COVID-19 pandemic at global and national level has seen many business processes disrupted, forcing very many of them to shut down. Operations have also suffered, and while others are struggling with staying afloat amidst these troubling times. So, undertaking research and rapid assessments of this nature is a key aspect of response to public health emergencies. Furthermore, with the proliferation of online social media platforms and increased access to the internet, the sharing of false and misleading information regarding COVID-19 is a growing concern, a very growing concern. Studies, research, robust communication strategies, and impact assessments of this nature come in handy to address this concern. In a special way, I would like to thank His Excellency President Museveni for the wise strategic leadership in this fight, because it has been exemplary. His leadership has been exemplary. Would also like to salute the health workers for the tremendous work they have been doing to track, to test, and manage the cases. And it is a pity when we know that some of them have fallen in the course of their duty. I also urge the law enforcement officers to maintain vigilance in ensuring public adherence to the directives and guidelines, and request the general public to desist from complacency and to exhibit a high level of compliance. The results we are witnessing in this fight, which are a collective function of very many stakeholders, may easily be lost if these are taken lightly. I also thank Ugandans and friends of Uganda out there for the outpouring generosity towards the COVID-19 fundraising drive, when you made contributions both in cash and in kind, including motor vehicles, assorted food items, medical supplies, and non-food items. This demonstrated the solidarity of Ugandans and our partners for a cause that unites us all. And indeed, we celebrate the hearts of gold that have given and continue to give towards this noble cause. Once again, I thank you for your continued support and role in mobilizing our citizens and resources to respond to the most challenging pandemic of our times. Indeed, we all know that this is the most challenging pandemic of our times. Globally, we are making good progress. Let us keep up the momentum, encouraging our people to remain calm and practice the preventive measures and adhere to the guidelines which have been provided by HE, the President, and the Minister of Health and other authorities. Collectively, we will defeat COVID-19. I thank you, and may God bless you abundantly.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. And I think it's only right that we also thank the Honorable Minister and the Office of the Prime Minister for the great work they did in mobilizing Ugandans and our development partners at the onset of the virus to contribute to this great cause as a country. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. May I now invite the country representative for Uganda, Dr. Querido Antonio, to come and make a presentation on the UN report. You're most welcome, Doctor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Maurice. I was told that you were supposed to launch a video prior to my presentation, but allow me first to recognize the honorable ministers, honorable minister in charge of general duties in the Office of Prime Minister, the honorable minister of State for Finance, Resident Rosa Malango, and all the heads of agency with us here and online. They're ready for the video. And all colleagues that took part in the preparation of this report, distinguished guests and participants with us here online, thank you for being with us. Let's first look at the video that will present a summary of the work that collectively the UN system in Uganda has prepared and to launch this important report on the social economic impact of the COVID-19 in Uganda.
Impacts from COVID-19 are on the rise. Like many countries, Uganda has put in place strict lockdown measures to prevent the further spread of the virus. However, with disruptions to supply chains, domestic production and key service sectors, jobs and livelihoods have been severely affected. In response to the UN Secretary General's call to support the world's most vulnerable nations fighting the pandemic, the the United Nations in Uganda, under the coordination leadership of the UN Resident Coordinator's Office, with technical leadership from the United Nations Development Programme, created a rapid impact assessment report entitled Leaving No One Behind, the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 in Uganda. With contributions from 14 UN agencies, the report quantifies actual and potential losses for Uganda in areas like manufacturing, agriculture, the private sector, service delivery, human development, and poverty. The report also explores the long-term implications of Uganda's response to COVID-19 and its impact on the SDGs as framed in the Third National Development Plan. With this information, it packages unique data-driven recommendations. While all sectors of the economy will be impacted by COVID-19, the crisis has already disproportionately affected service and manufacturing sectors. In tourism, the initial phase of the crisis alone could result in direct loss of up to $5 billion over the next 5 years. In agriculture, there have been disruptions in supply chains that threaten food and nutritional security. Some of these effects include labor shortages and even crop supplies, price spikes from panic buying, and severe shocks in the poultry and fishing industries. Revenue losses for informal micro-small enterprises, or MSCs, have taken a heavy toll. During the initial phase of the crisis, 46% of workers in informal manufacturing were pushed below the poverty line, with similar trends in hospitality and trading and services. Estimates show only about 15% of formal enterprises can sustain more than 3 months of operation. National poverty rates could rise between 2 and 8%. This leaves older persons, women, large households, refugees and marginalized groups vulnerable. And while SDGs are impacted across the board, potential impacts are likely to be more severe for SDG 1, 2, 3, 5 and 8. While the duration of the crisis in Uganda remains to be seen, one thing is clear: ensuring that no one is left behind in the response, recovery from COVID-19 requires measured and tactical steps. With this in mind, the Socio-Economic Impact Assessment Report offers a resilience roadmap through a series of policy recommendations. In macroeconomy and real sectors, national development planning should accommodate the new realities. With the Ministry of Finance and National Planning Authority, a comprehensive recovery plan and COVID-19 exit strategy will be important. Manufacturing processes will have to be reassessed and creative interventions are needed for a tourism recovery plan. In the formal and informal private sector, a recovery package is needed to support businesses' essential needs. This could include 1. Transitioning to e-commerce platforms, 2. Funding innovative or digital-based ideas, and 3. Stimulus packages for MSCs, and 4. The enforcement of eviction freezes due to non-payment of rent. In agriculture, Uganda must strengthen its production, storage and conservation capacities by 1. Scaling up food and livestock provisions, 2. Supporting home-based food production, 3. Reducing post-harvest losses by improving storage capacities, and 4. Support food production in refugee settlements. Investments in environment, natural resource management and disaster risk reduction will also be imperative. To ensure service delivery, Uganda must promote e-governance. Financial capital of local governments will help to implement and ensure continued delivery of basic services. Shock-responsive social protection will be a necessity to support marginalized populations. This will also increase the country's resilience in the face of other hazards like desert locusts and floods. Lastly, continued progress on SDGs will require a cautious mobilization of external resources, including the financial support of development partners and eliminating wasteful expenditures. As is currently being done by government, this should continue instead of reallocating resources from existing development programs. Uganda has a challenging road ahead in achieving its development goals. But with rapid action from governmental institutions, the development community and every citizen taking the lead, leaving no one behind is more than a message in Uganda. It is a promise.
Thank you again. This report is indeed a true effort of the UN country team in Uganda. Of course, in the preparation of this report, we have had the collaboration not only for the office here in Uganda, but also the regional office and the work of NPA also allowing us in the preparation of this report. Here, what I have for you today, this is a brief outline of the presentation. We'll quickly focus on the initial aspect of the report that you have seen so far, but focus also on the key findings and on the way forward. I think some of the things that you will see in terms of key findings probably have been overtaken by the events, but the way forward and the recommendation in terms of policies are critical to see how together we can move forward, not only responding, but not only recovering, but also building back better. So, under the overall coordination, next slide, please. Under the overall coordination of the RC office and the technical leadership of UNDP, this report really leverage the core competency of all UN agencies in Uganda, and it has allowed us to work together to build our technical teams, but also to bring the comparative advantage of different agencies here in Uganda to look at the impact of the social economic impact of COVID-19 in Uganda. Here is the structure of the report. It's a very beautiful report. I really recommend that you download or get a copy from UNDP. But it is structured in 7, there is an 8 chapter, but the bulk of the report is between chapter 2 and chapter 7. It presents the introductory aspects of providing not only the trend in terms of COVID implication, but the analytical aspect and how we went about in terms of the analysis. You can see chapter 2 to chapter 7, where we look, chapter 2 on the macroeconomic aggregates. Here we look at aspects, the knock-on effect of COVID-19 on Uganda macroeconomics, looking not only at GDP, the inflation, but the fiscal deficit, the current balance, the foreign exchange, the remittance. So it's quite an in-depth analysis on the macroeconomics of the country. Agriculture and food security is also an important component of this report. As you know, agriculture is the backbone of Uganda's economy, and to fight COVID-19, we need to eat. So it is strategic for the nation. So we look at agriculture from the perspective of the sector itself, but also in terms of the food security, not only for Uganda, but also for the region. At this sector, we look at the prices, the impact of the price fluctuations, and we have seen that during the pandemic, there was some spikes in terms of the cereals, the salt went up, the sugar went up. We had some shortage in terms of some commodities. So we look at on the price because it has an implication on the affordability of these resources. So the private sector, as we all know, this is looking at the micro, but also small and medium enterprises, because it's quite critical to your economy, not only for its contribution to the overall GDP, but the amount of output that comes from of the private sector is mainly from micro and also small and medium enterprises. A very interesting study with the help of UN Women, looking at informally and unemployed women, not only in Kampala but also in northern Uganda, really gives an in-depth analysis on the chapter 4 of this report. We look at service delivery and also in implication on the human development. National Human Development Index was developed in the context of this analysis, looking at the impact of COVID-19 in terms of service delivery and its implication on human development. Chapter 6, of course, looking at the poverty aspects, and all the undesirable impact of COVID-19 on the welfare of the Uganda people. But we look at the labor income, we look at the non-labor income, but changes in impact on the consumption. It was also critical to look at the most vulnerable in Uganda. Of course, the long-term implication here, we look at the impact of COVID-19 on achieving SDGs. Here we look at the scenarios and the assumptions that are critical to see what are the measures that we should be put in place to avoid some undesirable negative impact of COVID-19. Next, I will focus on the selected key findings. As I mentioned, most of us has probably seen some of this impact. Some of them have been overtaken by the event. But our initial estimates, this only proved that our analysis was on target, that the initial estimates suggest that the national poverty rate could rise between 2 and 8%. Tourism affecting mainly the most vulnerable and marginalized groups, particularly those on informal sector, women, and people with disabilities and chronic condition, but also with an impact on the youth and elderly. The second finding of this report is that tourism, manufacturing, and service sectors will be disproportionately affected. We have seen not only in Uganda but throughout the world how tourism sector has come to a halt because as we restrict the movement of people, of course, this sector are affected. So tourism industry, as an example, have lost a lot of resource here, estimating this report to be 5 billion in terms of revenue in the next 5 years. There is also a long-term implication on the NDP3. We saw that as this was happening, COVID-19, NDP3, some of the assumption initially during the report, we had to revisit, to reconsider the COVID-19. We are looking at the implication of SDGs. Some of the sectors are going back in terms of their analysis to factor in the COVID-19 because it is quite critical to look at ways to respond, but also how we recover better from this pandemic. Disruption in food supply chain, we have seen this. The movement, the restriction of movement, not only across the border, but internally. I've mentioned that we have seen spike in the prices. We have seen some, particularly on the perishable fruits and vegetables, there has been a decline in disruption. Most of us have changed also our consumption pattern. So the disruption in food supply has been one of the key findings, putting food security at the center as a strategic aspect for the Uganda development going forward. The reduction in the central government releases, a lot of resource had to be taken away from some sectors to the fight of COVID-19. This definitely had impact in terms of the transfer for the local government with an impact on the service delivery at the local level. And the last one in terms of key findings, we have briefly discussed about it, is the implication on not only on the NDP3, but also on the SDGs, and then going forward, how resources are allocated, looking forward for the Agenda 2030, but also for the Uganda Vision 2040. Key recommendations are along this line of the report, although you can see every chapter we have presented the key message of for the sector, also presented key recommendation specific to the sector, but here we have compiled in major ones that are quite relevant for the overall study. So the first one is that we recognize that this is a living document. We need to, going forward, to develop a comprehensive but also a costed recovery plan for COVID-19, looking on ways of the affected sectors to be redefined in the context of NDP 3, but also to adjust to the emerging realities. We have discussed in ways to see how we can enhance the resilience of the manufacturing sector in the way that it provides also some support for the sectors like tourism that has been seriously affected. Create adequate fiscal space, particularly for local government, to enable them to implement, but to respond, to take some emergency measures that are critical for the basic service delivery. In terms of social protection, we have seen that those that did have a better social protection coped better with the COVID-19. So we believe that the implementation of social protection measures to support the poor, the vulnerable, but also the marginalized population can and should be scaled up in a way that it provides the resilience that the population need to cope with such negative impact of COVID-19 and other shocks. The sixth key recommendation is a balance in terms of resource mobilization, external resource, and how these resources then are allocated to prevent a regression on the SDGs achievement, but also to make the right choice in terms of resource distributions and also allocation at the local level. Last one have to do that we do all of this, protecting the natural resource bases that are important. How we can recover from COVID-19 and other shocks in a manner that really builds resilience, but at the same time, we build a greener economy and we protect the natural resource base. I think going forward, this has been a year of crisis, but a year of opportunity. I think COVID-19 pandemic has exposed all our vulnerabilities. We have seen in almost all sectors. And then there is an opportunity for us to do things different. It's an opportunity for us to reset and rethink ways that we've been doing things. And I think here, definitely for a better result, there is an opportunity going forward. Here are the key aspects that as a UN system we're proposing, that this is indeed a living document. So we have to continually reassess some of this analysis, some of this impact on the crisis, and see how then we respond in a way that really is adjusted to local context. And forward-looking, as I mentioned before, looking not only for 2030, but also how we can focus on areas related to governance, social protection, green economy, as well create a digital disruption to take advantage of these new opportunities that we do have with COVID-19 to do things differently. Here are some areas that UN is already looking at it in terms of, you have seen some digital innovation in terms of creating opportunities for the government to continue to operate and take advantage of the new technologies. But some offers when it comes to energies, how we can hear the lighting of some facilities, but there is an opportunity when it comes to a number of sectors to look at renewable energy as the way forward, not only to reduce our carbon footprint, but also to lower the cost of the energy. Ways of looking at integrated response. Here the NECOC plays a critical role in how We're looking at the different crises that we have seen throughout this year, not only COVID-19, the desert locust, the flood, the moving island, and the rising of the lake. We have seen it all this year. And there is a need for an integrated approach when it comes to crisis management, but also when it comes to resource allocation and how different sectors can come together to look at the challenge at hand. Of course, the economic and financial incentives are critical for some sectors that have been affected by the pandemic. The way forward, looking beyond the recovery and towards 2030, and here, next slide, we provide some pathways that we believe that can help manage these complexities and these uncertainties. The first is see how we can attract the private sector investment. This is critical in terms of the need for incentive mechanism to attract private sector investment and repackaging some of the banking instrument, as well as de-risking private sector capital. The second that we're proposing is how then we position local economic development as a driver for industrialization and a building base for local economic development. Here, we're looking at aspects relating empowering local government and communities to drive change, how we can have the partnership between private investment at local level, but continue to look at value chains. We have been talking about value addition, but ways we transform not only agriculture sector, the manufacturing, to ensure that we add value and we don't export our jobs with the raw material. Also, looking at ways to implement the reforms that are critical in terms of the land tenure. Land tenure is a critical aspect for the development, one important factor, not only to ensure the tenure security, but we need land to develop. The third one has to do with building the strengths in terms of national resilience for disaster. We have briefly discussed about it. How going forward the role of NCOC in terms of coordinating and dealing with the disaster risk management. To promote digital transformation, here is the opportunity to enhance e-governance, to make sure that the service and the governance as a whole is closer to the people, but allowing also the private sector to take advantage of this digital transformation to deliver their service, but also to be closer to the community, but looking at the continent as a whole. Here, critical for the African Free Trade Agreement, it is important that we, Uganda, take up the advantage of the digital transformation to reach out to other markets, not only in the sub-region, but also the continent as a large. Public sector reform, support the government to build efficient and to coordinate institutions to drive the recovery for an industrialization agenda, while promoting the synergies between sectors. Here we have mentioned some: agriculture, trade, water, environment, energy. All these sectors, there is opportunities for us to work better, but looking at the role of local government, not only to deliver the service, but also to drive the development at the local level. Now, this is my last slide. We believe that as a UN here in Uganda, we definitely will continue to work with our partners, with the government of Uganda, in protecting the poor, the vulnerable, but also continue to strengthen the national institution, in some case to build, in others to rebuild back better. But we want a more resilient, not only cities, but rural areas, but continue to empowering the youth and the women and foster the development, looking at social protection as a key aspect, not forgetting the natural resource base, the natural capital, while we promote the development of small and medium enterprise and the manufacturing, but reinforcing, of course, the human capital, the respect for human rights, the rule of law and accountability, and continue to promote capable and accountable government institutions. I think, as I mentioned, there is an opportunity for us to come out of this crisis stronger and more resilient. However, for all of us to witness this change, we need to continue reassess this analysis. As I mentioned, this is a living document. We have to continue to reassess some of the analysis that we have come to analyze here on this document, but reassess in the context that we continue to provide a more dynamic intervention to address the crisis that we have at hand, but also leave institutions that are robust to cope with other crises. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Doctor. It's the new normal, Doctor. We're all getting used to this. And so surely we can do better. A round of applause on the highlights of the COVID impact report. I need to mention, just in case you're wondering where you can find the report and you're watching and joining us online, please log on to the UNDP website, ug.undp.org. You will be able to find the first might be the article when you open the page that has the highlights of the report, but when you go to the bottom of the page you will find the full report which you can actually download. But as you open the full report page, you will also see a policy brief on the report and a fact sheet also on the report, and so you can actually dig in, but I suggest you do that after this launch, and we will be launching the report very shortly. It now gives me great pleasure to invite the Honorable Dr. Jedra Gabriel to make his keynote address. You're welcome, Honorable Minister.
This is what is called the new norm. Your Excellency, the UN representative to Uganda, representatives of the private sector and the civil society, development partners, ladies and gentlemen, I hope reserve the protocol. Allow me to start by thanking all of you for honoring this invitation to the launch and also for your active participation. I greatly appreciate everyone who has been able to join the event, both in person, also through Zoom. Allow me to thank United Nations Uganda for organizing and hosting this event. This year has been a unique one, with the world facing an unprecedented health crisis because of COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in increased uncertainties and also damaged near economic prospects. In Uganda, the pandemic continues to test the resilience of the economy. As we have already been indicated, the effects of the pandemic have been keenly felt through through the key service sectors such as tourism and hospitality, while disruptions to the supply chain, particularly affecting manufacturing, construction, trade, etc. In addition, the slowdown in the pace of the global economic activities continue to inhibit our export performance, while also negatively affecting our remittances from abroad. Additionally, foreign direct investment has also been greatly affected. On the social side, the number of people falling into poverty increased, with a higher impact on older persons, women, youth, households with a high ratio of persons with specific needs, in addition to those with the refugee or migrant status and marginalized groups such as indigenous communities. This has called for immediate social protection for the vulnerable. Despite the countless hardships, the pandemic has provided us with opportunities for increased domestic production and value addition. And government has seized this opportunity and is working closely with the private sector to harness these opportunities. To address the health and economic challenges brought about by the pandemic, government is implementing a number of key interventions. One, government of Uganda has made available additional resources for health spending. And this has enabled the hiring of additional health workers, upgrading health infrastructure, and provision of PPEs, that's the personal protection equipment. In addition, we have scaled up resources to support scientists and innovators engaged in scientific research for COVID-19 interventions. We prioritized the support to those affected by the pandemic, for example, the youth, women, the elderly, through social protection interventions, including provision of food relief, increasing coverage of the social assistance grant for empowerment, the SURGE program, provision of agricultural inputs, and the labor-intensive public works. 3, in order to reignite business activity, we have provided additional resources through Uganda Development Bank, amounting to 455 billion, and to Uganda Development Corporation, 100 billion, for onward lending to small and medium enterprises. For the informal micro business, the financial support has been channeled through the Microfinance Support Center, totaling about 160 billion. In order to ease liquidity constraints faced by the private businesses, government is expediting payment of outstanding VAT refunds due to businesses. Domestic arrears are being paid, with a priority given to SMEs, cooperative societies, and contractors who have supplied goods and services to government. And to date, I'm happy to announce that the government has cleared up to 305 billion Uganda shillings. In May 2020, the government commenced easing of some of the containment measures which enabled the reopening of some of the sectors of the economy. The good news is that we are starting to see signs of economic recovery, as shown by the high frequency indicators of the economic activity. Though this is gradual and uneven across the sectors, we now see Ugandans back to work and also engaging in productive activities. Nonetheless, the easing of the measures has also coincided with the acceleration of the pace in the spread of the virus, including a significant number of Ugandans losing their lives. I think as by yesterday, the total number had risen to about 98, with over 10,000 so far infected. The removal of the restrictions on the international travel and gatherings will pose additional risks unless the health measures are adhered to. And unfortunately, we're going to learn to live with the virus until we're able to discover and, more to the point, produce and distribute an effective vaccine or treatment on a large scale. As we deal with the challenges of the pandemic, we need to accelerate planning for what will be the new economic order. We cannot aspire to go back to the things that we were doing before the crisis. We must adapt existing measures to restore business confidence and also work towards a recovery that is inclusive for all of us. Going forward, strong multilateral cooperation on multiple fronts remains essential as we work towards containing the pandemic and also mitigating its impact on the economy. International cooperation is crucial for discovering, producing, and distributing a vaccine on a massive scale. To face the ongoing financial needs required to support our recovery efforts, liquidity support from multinational institutions will be required, including debt relief and financing through global financial safety net. And beyond the pandemic, it is equally important to strengthen international cooperation and to resolve trade and technology tensions that endanger any eventual recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. I believe we have been rewarded with some of the stimulating and thoughtful ideas from the report that has just been presented. And I speak on behalf of everyone here that I must say that this has been enormously helpful. It is by open discussion of lessons, successes, challenges, and experiences that we can learn and move forward successfully. So once again, in conclusion, I want to thank all of you for your invaluable time, and we look forward to very energizing discussions of the report in the coming few minutes. I'm confident that we will all leave here with a great sense of what we must do to reinvigorate and also accelerate growth and make it more inclusive for all Ugandans. With these few words, I thank you so much for your attention. I say this for God and my country.
So before I invite our panel that will be chaired by the UN resident representative, I want to request that
we need to feel the youth exuberance. A round of applause for our youth. So I'm just now going to be seated on the podium so that conversations can happen. So once again, colleagues, good morning. We've had a very good segue into the conversation this morning. We heard from Honorable Okorot. We heard from the Minister Ajedra. We also heard from the resident coordinator. We heard from Dr. Antonio, who laid the foundation for the conversation. What is the conversation today? The conversation is about the impact of COVID, not only from a health perspective, but also looking at the socio-economic dimensions. We've had conversations around the potential increase in poverty levels, the impact on the informal sector, the impact on the sustainable development goals. But what is important today is not the negative impact. What is important today is the strategies to recover from the pandemic, but importantly, how do we build a resilient country moving forward for our beautiful Pearl of Africa? Now, we want to be able to share perspectives, and I think, as always says, the stars are aligned. We have in this pandemic also at the time that we have developed our third national development plan. So I'm going to start off the conversation with Pamela. And first to thank you and your team for the great work on the NDP 3. Now, I just want to share some perspective really around what you see as the implications of COVID-19 on the NDP 3 implementation. And most importantly, to focus on how should the NDP 3 implementation be done in a different way, in a strategic way, to really ensure that we are recovering from the pandemic and we're also building resilience. What kind of strategies should we put in place? And also, what do you expect development partners, the United Nations, the private sector, and others to contribute to that vision that you're looking at? And I know you'll be stepping out at some point in time, so I'm going to be downloading a lot of questions on you. But as you reflect with us, how do we really build a resilient nation? You know, what do we need to do differently? As the Honorable Minister said, we have to learn to live with the crisis. And so with a forward-looking eye I want to have some perspectives from you as the chair of NPA and who has been really at the center of the National Development Plan, which is really part of our Vision 2040 implementation. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I would request that I be allowed to remove the mask. I'm trying to adjust to this new normal, and it's not coming easy as I would expect. So let me begin by thanking the UN family in Uganda for inviting us to be a part of this panel, but most importantly also, and of course I do observe protocol, I want to thank you most graciously for having coordinated to undertake this very timely analysis and research to come up with this report, because for a very long time as developing countries, we tend to rely so much on research that is done out there, and we are very grateful that we can have a body of knowledge right here with us that does look at the issues and what impact COVID has done. And as NPA, we really treasure the material that has been generated, and we do associate ourselves with you. So thank you, and we're very grateful. Back to your point, Madam Elsie, I think that as NPA, let me point out, though, that as this COVID pandemic came and was manifest globally and indeed here in Uganda, we were at the tail end of completion of our NDP 3. And I want to mention that we were able, as NPA, to, as much as we could, integrate some changes into the finalization of the NDP 3. So we have tried as much as possible to capture the required policies and strategic interventions as a country that we need to focus on going forward. You are right to mention that the previous speakers, including the honorable ministers and their excellencies, have been able to point out very clearly what impact the COVID has had on our economy. And of course, we are very well aware that the overall pandemic will affect the attainment of our NDP 3 goal, which is actually the, improving household incomes and the quality of life of Ugandans. Now, this pandemic, as was rightly pointed out from the previous speakers, is going to have a quasi-negative effect, of course, as well as positive effect. Negative effect in the sense that our economic growth is going to slow down, and already NPA is projecting, although we had predicted initially prior to COVID a 7% growth, now we're looking at 2 to 3%. But that notwithstanding, we also are expectant of building resilience as an economy. And we do we have looked at some of the strategic interventions as a country and have recommended, which are captured in the plan, as to what needs to be done to ensure that our economy recovers from this. And of course, in this recovery process, we are looking at how are we going to implement the key strategies. As you're aware, we have laid out 18 programs, and of these programs, there are some that we have had to bring forward, one of which I'll point out is the digitization program. Now, a lot of negatives have been talked about in terms of the impact of the COVID-19, but one of the positives actually that we could, and as a country, we are strategically looking at accentuating is the digitization program. As you're aware, with COVID-19 coming into place, we've had now a lot of our businesses going online. There's a lot of ordering of food online, ordering of commodities online. We see, the mobile money is being used much more widely. Now, as a country, we're saying, let's change the way we're doing work and even operating as government and be more digital. And this has necessitated our bringing forward, front-loading the activities that we had planned to do in the third to fourth year much more earlier. So we're saying, let's look more at strengthening the capacity of the country to go digital, and we are very grateful to the support and collaboration we've had with our development partners, particularly the UN family, in trying to look at this. Now, the other area that we are looking at strategically is food security. We are saying that, again, on the agro-industrialization program, much as different efforts had been put in place to ensure that we look at the whole value chain analysis. As a country, you recall when COVID came into place, we really had not prepared ourselves well to deal with especially the vulnerable groups. So we're saying going forwards, we need to prioritize food security as a country and look at what we need to do as a country to ensure we become food secure. So we're saying that in terms of interventions and strategically, the security issues of the country need to bring in the component of food security to ensure that as a country we work together in ensuring we address this particular issue. We are also looking at stimulating aggregate demand. We want to make sure that both in the short and medium time, we target expenditure interventions not just at the household level, but also at the farm level by focusing more, and I think the Honorable Minister mentioned this, in looking at small and medium enterprise support of programs like Emyoga, the UDC financing, UDB financing, but government is deliberately and intentionally looking at spending its limited resources in stimulating aggregate demand by ensuring that expenditure goes on promoting Emyoga, promoting UDC to strengthen small and medium enterprises so that as an economy we come out of COVID. But we also, as NPA, are saying, as government, we need to minimize revenue leakages. And this is where the digitization component also comes in. Government has developed a domestic revenue mobilization strategy, and now with the COVID coming in and the fact that our revenues have reduced, we need to deliberately, and we are pushing for ensuring that the leakages in government really are tightened. The other element we want to, we have recommended and have pushed for is improvement of expenditure rationalization in government. And this is mainly looking at import substitution. We did have this strategy before, but it has become more accentuated, promoted further by His Excellency, but also conditioned as it is by COVID, that as a country we need to deliberately and intentionally focus our limited resources in strengthening our capacity as a country to produce most of the goods that we consume. So we want, if we were thinking, for instance, of having our iron and steel factory focused on in the third to fourth year, we are saying we need to start now. Uganda is seated on one of the largest deposits of iron ore. We can't continue paying lip service to this. COVID has brought us an opportunity. We are working together to ensure we front load the critical areas as a country. We can import substitute and reduce our expenditure. Of course, we want to also ensure strategically that as government, we prioritize only those areas that are going to help us increase employment for the youth. So if government comes in to support, whether through UDC, whether through UDB, small-scale industries, medium-scale industries, but also attracting foreign direct investment that specifically is able to provide more employment, more opportunities for our youth to be employed, that is going to be the focus. So in answer to your question, Madam Elsie, I think that broadly, those are the key strategic areas as a country we want to really focus and work with the development partners, private sector, work with civil society, work with average Ugandans to ensure that we build resilience, we work together in ensuring that as a country we can mitigate the negative effects of COVID. I thank you. Well, thank you very much. A round of applause. I think some of you wanted to clap for her, so please feel free to do that. I think I'll have and I beg your indulgence, viewers and colleagues, because I know you have to leave at some point. You've talked about some really great things that we will do, but I just want to zero down a bit on what is your expectation when it comes to development partners? I mean,
Right.
what should we do differently? Because for us, it has to be business unusual.
Yes.
And what has to be unusual about it? Again, coming back to the question of how do we build a resilient country moving forward? And great ideas, but, you know, a bit of meat on the bone.
Okay, thank you. Again, I think previously there has been a lot of, how should I put it, in terms of the method of work. We have largely been approaching, or development partners have approached support to government in a fragmented way, in a puzzled way. I'm very glad that with the UN cooperation framework that has been put in place, it brings the UN family together. I think this needs to stretch out to all development partners so that we deliberately and intentionally, as a country, work with our development partners to prioritize the areas that we see will have a much more tangible effect in empowering us, but also ensuring that we deal with the critical issues. I talked about ensuring that we deal with youth employment, for instance. We deal with import substitution, but also the issues of social protection. We have to protect our vulnerable groups. We need to prioritize those key critical areas, and rather than have our development partners defining your priorities, let's come to a table, let's agree the method of work has to change. We need to make sure that we move systematically and categorically, that we prioritize what is it that will have a much bigger and impactful effect on our economy, working with the prioritization of government, ensure that we do the right thing.
One thing that you want to say, actually, that's your aha moment. You have it now. There's one thing that you want to say, it's this is one thing that I think should be done. What is that one thing?
Now, that is a tall order, but I feel very strongly, if you allow me to be very blunt, I think as a country, we really need to deal with the employment issue. For me, it is important that our youth get employed. How do we do this? It's not about creating just the jobs. It's also looking at the human capital development. And what do I mean by human capital development? It touches not just on the education, but also the health. And the health is also loaded. It's not just the curative aspect. So it has the water, the environment. So in answer to your question, I would, for me, and as NPA, I think that the youth employment is important, but it is loaded because it also involves the issue of mindset change. Mindset change is also about education. It's also about how do we actually touch the well-being of the family? How do we look at the society? So I would not want us to wish-wash it off with one particular intervention or one particular, this is what you have to do, but in terms of the broader element that I see needs to be prioritized as a country, I think youth employment is important. That we look at how do we deal with this, but it comes from a broader perspective for us to be able to make an impact. It's not just looking at the tail end of creating employment, but looking at the quality of the individual. How do we ensure that our youth can be employed? And they will entail looking at how do we change their mindsets, how do we educate them better, how do we ensure that they are healthy, how do we ensure that they are productive, and therefore create an opportunity the other end.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mbabazi, for those foundational elements. I mean, going back to the basics, the NDP 3, what programs we need to prioritize as a country, how we need to work differently, and coming back to the question around youth and employment. So this is a very good segue, and I'm going to come back to our youth representative very soon. But I'm looking at you, Maureen, and you've been listening very, very well and attentively to Pamela. And you have been one of the, with COVID impact, women have been impacted, their livelihoods have been impacted. And there's a good old saying that if you educate a woman, you educate a nation. In other words, when you empower a woman, you empower a lot of livelihoods and you promote the development of a country. So from where you sit, what kind of initiatives, what kind of policy reforms, what kind of interventions should we put in place, should we amplify to really position women to contribute to the recovery and the resilience building agenda?
Thank you, Elsa. Thank you, Elsa. All protocol observed. I'm really grateful for this occasion that is happening today and for inviting us, representing the CSOs, and the research that you've been able to publish for us to learn from, and also to inform our operations that are coming forth. And I would love to say that I really appreciate the issues that are arising from the report, but also focusing on the situation under the areas where I'm operating, and that is the informal sector, specifically the market women. The impact of COVID has been very huge because, no one was prepared for it. And especially for the market women, when it came, there was a lot of instabilities that were happening within the market. First of all, they were not prepared, and then the government requested that at least the markets should continue operating because they were considered to be essential. And here they were sleeping in the markets. They were sleeping in the markets, not prepared at all. The sanitation conditions are really appalling in the markets. So to us, it was a challenge to the market women because many of them, because in the process of trying to restructure physically the settings of the market, many of them lost, their stalls. They could not operate, and this affected their families as well. They could not even get food for their families because, they live hand to mouth. So this period was very hard for them. But again, we thank the UN Women for the support because when the lockdown came, at least we had developed the market garden application, and I'm appreciating the process that at least all the discussions that have been happening, they're talking about digitalization. And we had developed this market garden application during, that was 2018. So when the lockdown came, it gave people a push because we were trying to work on the change of the mindset of people to appreciate technology and selling products online. And it's very hard when you look at the community of markets. People, they take the smartphones to be, luxuries. So the lockdown helped us a lot, that at least people started embracing it, and even the community at large to start appreciating that I don't have to work specifically to go to the market, but I can make the orders online and my goods will be delivered. So I appreciate that at least we're able to bridge and also to control the spread of COVID. But the effect is still on, because I can give the example of
I don't want you to focus so much on the effects,
Yes.
Maureen. I want you to focus on what should be done. I mean, you're drawing experience from the market experience, informal sector. What kind of interventions, okay? Because there are a lot of women who are listening in, not only the market women, who want to be able to appreciate what can be done. So from where you said what can be done, what kind of reforms, what kind of interventions, drawing lessons from what you've been doing with the market vendors.
Yeah, drawing the lessons from there, I appreciate that through the cooperatives that were formed, we need to bring in financial support to the women through the cooperatives that were formed. Because I'm still drawing back to the challenges, because when you look at the effect of COVID, these women during that period were not able to save, and they could not even access finances from the banks during that period. So we are looking at how do we recover from that and strengthen the support of women to continue moving forward. So the issue of financial support is key, and then digitalization, so that we can change also the mindset of the people, is also one of them. And then putting in place affordable insurance policies for this group. And then we are also looking at the areas of value addition, because you see a number of them lost their products during that period because many of them are mainly into perishable products. So we are looking at value addition. How can we enable the market women or all women who are into business and for these fresh products to upgrade, but also skilling. It is key for these people because during that period, we were able to intervene with a few of them and they were requesting other skills beyond the store. Because you may realize that only people who are able to sell fresh products were allowed to be in the market. So those who are not selling fresh products were thrown out. So we need to look into that. How can we be able to support the women? So for me, those are the key areas that I'm looking at for us to be able to push.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the conversation is on. The conversations are on the COVID impact, but importantly, the strategies to recover and to build resilience. This morning, we've been hearing from a couple of panelists. We've heard from Professor Pamela Mbabazi, who laid the foundation talking about the country's third national development plan and how we need to move forward with its implementation in a strategic way. She's also told us about the need to work differently to coordinate efforts towards supporting the government's Vision 2040. We've also heard about the impact on women, particularly, and we need to do something about it. Our friend Maureen has also shared with us some of the things to be done, the financial instruments, digitalization, scaling, and a number of things. So the conversation is still on, and I'm going to come back to you, Musa, very soon. But before then, I want to come back to you, Emma, because you were listening in your private sector, and you're listening to somebody like Maureen, who is saying we need financial instruments. I just wanted to speak to the subject of innovative financing. Again, when the Honorable Minister talked, and also even NPA, Pamela talked about the fact that domestic resource mobilization, for example, has shrunk. And therefore, what can we do differently? So how can you talk about, different instruments? How do we adapt them to support the recovery and the resilience building agenda? What should be done differently? Not only from the Stanbic point of view, but really speaking on behalf of the private sector. What incentives will be required? I mean, some reflections from you on that will be very crucial.
Thank you very much, Elsa, and thank you all for the invite. All protocol observed. When we started off with COVID, the first thing that the financial industry did was to support borrowers with moratoriums. Now that's not very innovative, but that was like the knee-jerk reaction. And at that point, we were figuring out, will this take 3 months, 6 months? Now those initial moratoriums, 6 months later, are actually running out. And now is when we are starting to assess the real effect of COVID on businesses. So one of the things that the industry is doing as a whole banking industry is to actually go back and have conversations with customers to say, okay, we gave you a moratorium for 6 months. What do we need to do to help you to survive? Because it doesn't help us as an industry for all our customers to get into non-performing loans. So the first bit is really to have conversations with our customers on long-term survival after COVID, and how do we restructure, how do we support our customers to find a way out. So that's the one thing that's happening at the moment, because that initial 6-month period is actually running out. Then everybody's talked about digital, and it's unfortunate that we will one day look back and say, what is the one thing that led us to be digital, and we'll say COVID. All of us had digital plans, but we've had to quickly put them in place because of COVID. So back to savings, account opening, transactions, online transactions. I mean, we are all struggling now to connect to Safe Border, to Jumia, to everyone who can do anything online, because we have to go digital. And we've also gone beyond that and looked at things like a trade club where customers cannot travel to China. I know we're trying to do import substitution, but on the way, customers cannot travel to China. So how do we have a platform on which they have access to suppliers and have a safe way to be able to import what they need to import and pay for it and safely? So all these digital channels are coming up, and it's not just Stanbic. You will see that every day there will be somebody talking about, whether it's Centenary with the Center Express, or somebody else will be talking about something digital in this space. But I think my favorite outcome of this pandemic has been partnerships. The partnerships between government, civil society, private sector have been amazing. I don't know where we were all this time. Everybody was in their little silo doing their thing, but we've realized that this is a leveling ground where we need to work together in order to have the biggest impact. So as Stanbic, I have to speak about Stanbic. We've partnered with UNDP, we've partnered, and we are in the process of partnering with the wider UN, as Rosa said earlier. But I've also, I've tried to Google post-COVID partnerships, and I could see StanChat with, I think it was ABSA with UNICEF, StanChat with another UN organization. So the partnerships have been one thing that has come up really strongly, and something we need to capitalize on for bigger impact. And then lastly, we've talked about how do we get resilient going forward. I think the one thing we realized as Ugandans during the lockdown is our saving culture is so bad. I think average savings per person, if you take an average, is probably 5,000 shillings, which then, we've got a saying in Uganda which says, "Mele ya lero," which is food for today. And that has worked for us as Ugandans because we have food. Generally, we have food. And has worked until you get into a place where that food is not available, or you can't get it, or you can't travel to the garden. What happens? So the one thing we need to do in these partnerships is improve our saving culture as a country and as a people, and get away from that mentality of survival for today into being resilient. If we can all save, then Pamela's plans will easily come to pass because there'll be resources enough. The president is always castigating us as having very high interest rates. If we can all save, there'll be enough money. We will have to lend at lower rates. So that, if there's one thing, if you ask me, the one thing that we need to do is find a way of improving our saving culture as a people.
Ladies and gentlemen, the conversation is on. We've been just heard from the private sector, improving our savings culture, digitalization, restructuring some of the loans, and really partnering, doing things differently. But I'm not letting you off the hook, Emma, because, and I perhaps play the devil's advocate a bit. Pamela says, well, we need to import substitute. And you say, well, we're helping the traders to import more and helping them with platforms. There seems to be some contradiction there. And therefore, what I want to come back to you, how do you help with the import substitution agenda? What kind of incentives can you provide for the people to produce locally instead of helping them with a platform to import some more?
So what's interesting is some of the imports on the platform we have is called Trade Club. What's been interesting is there's been a lot of requests on machinery. So smaller cottage-like machinery. And maybe it's getting ideas so that we can also figure out how to make that machinery locally, maybe in Katwe or somewhere. We've been looking at value chains, so different value chains, and how do you find innovation in those value chains for value addition? Because I think, especially when it comes to agriculture, we really need to work on value addition because we've been blessed as a country. I mean, if you look at the red tomatoes in this country on any one day, and most of those actually go bad, if we could just find those small cottage industries that are able to do that value addition, then that will really add value to the whole ecosystem.
So, all right, so talking about partnership, we need to deepen that conversation and to see how the banking sector and private sector can help with the agenda of import substitution. I think that's a crucial one, and I think we'll keep the conversation alive. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching me, it's still about COVID-19 and what kind of strategies we can put in place to promote recovery and resilience building. It's also based on a report that the UN just commissioned, which is on the impact of COVID-19 on Uganda, but importantly on the vulnerable groups, and we call it Leave No One Behind. Now, Musa, you're just listening in. The big women are talking here, MPA and Emma and Maureen, and you're saying, okay, well, what can be done practically for the youth? There are a lot of youth initiatives by government, by development partners. How can we deepen that to ensure that we can recover and build a resilient nation. Noting that our country, the beautiful Pearl of Africa, is the second youngest population in Africa. The youth is our asset. They have been impacted a lot during COVID. And as was mentioned earlier on, the United Nations, for example, we put together a youth for business facility to just help young people. But what more do you want to see, Musa?
Thank you so much. Musa Kaswezi, my name. I work with Youth After School Initiative, an organization that enables the transition of youth from school to the world of work. And in that regard, we have quite a number of youth, ranging from students themselves. There has been a lockdown. Even university students have been down, have been home. Then the graduates, and then the school dropouts. It's a huge chunk of youth we are dealing with. Youth have been a punching bag by many stakeholders. These are the people who are asked a wide range of experience. From 5 years, I've seen adverts, 10 years. That is an automatic way of chasing youth from such employment. Then they had gone to border borders. Border borders have not been working. They ran to agriculture, agribusiness, where we have fake products on market, agriculture inputs, seeds, and the drugs. Then the development partners have sized their age bracket, 15 to 24. Development partners, that is many of them consider that, especially international agencies. And a number of these youth are at school around at that age. That means youth are practically left out, even in development international development programming. So they have had a number of challenges. I have this as a way forward if we are to support this group of people enter into the workplace. I would propose agribusiness. And this is normally what they tell us. Government should consider, and development partners should take agribusiness very seriously. Agriculture as food, as a source of employment, as medicine, as it fits in so many categories. But when you look at the budget, including the national budget that's given to agriculture, it is such a small fraction. It's known that the economic substructure determines ideological superstructure. We cannot keep talking about agriculture as the backbone of Uganda when we see it, we don't see that reflected in the national budgets. Agriculture can have a classified budget. Today we see huge amounts of money allocated to defense, yet we don't have major wars we are fighting in the country. Over a few days back, the youth celebrated when they heard of a supplementary budget of 3.7 trillion, and their assumption was now a big chunk of it was going to go to agriculture and related value chain, only to hear that again a big proportion of it was going to State House. We were wondering whether there were a lot of business or gardens in the State House that required such huge amounts of money. We are trying to disconnect ourselves from reality. During the formulation of National Development Plan 2, I got a privilege to have been invited by stakeholders, the various stakeholders, and I warned myself that Uganda was likely to fail achieving National Development Plan 2 if we disconnect ourselves from ventures where we have comparative advantage. We are aware of the number of population agriculture employs in the country. Okay, if it doesn't bring returns on our, in terms of forex and all that, we can then do it as on humanitarian ground. That if it employs majority of the people, let's put finances where most of our people are, especially younger people. I would therefore have the following recommendations. Where can we get funds to add to the agriculture budget? Let's stop or even reduce the decentralization process that has been going on, that comes handy with a very huge administrative burden. You have RDCs, you have the DSOs, the PSOs, the whatever. So you find so many councillors supervising few technocrats. These days we have districts where you find a district engineer is even richer than a district itself. But the government is still proposing for more districts that...
So Musa, I'm not cutting you here. I just want you to focus more on, I mean, if agribusiness is a trend, I want to hear more about how you can be supported practically. Because here you are with NPAs here, you're here in the private sector. What is it that can be done? I mean, agriculture should be a business.
We need...
I know the decentralization agenda is important, but I want you to focus on the thrust of the conversation, which is what can be done to support the youth.
Increase agriculture funding. I was giving options where funds can come from, but increase agriculture funding, if that is possible. We can also create market linkages. Instead of giving youth funds, we can create markets for them. Actually, youth don't need the funds more. They need market more than the funds, the initial funds we give them. Some of them have managed to do, to start either way, the way they can start, but then where to sell. The government and stakeholders should also support the post-harvest handling. There are many young people and other stakeholders have cultivated products. You find tomatoes, they have them in bulk, but then they're after where to sell them, and then they are rotting. So you find that they will be forced to sell at very cheap prices or even lose them when they rot. We also propose to have quality skilling. There are a number of young people who don't know exactly what to do in agriculture. Even some of their staff, for example, at local government, they are themselves not conversant. One time, some youth invited agricultural practitioners from the sub-county to support them in mushroom growing. And these extension workers did not know, they didn't have skills to support youth grow mushroom growing. So we need to support youth with the skills and also use professionals at every level who can support those who are trying to foster agriculture or who are trying to promote agriculture. Thank you very much.
All right, so thank you very much for bringing the perspectives of the youth, and I'm going to very quickly be inviting Rogers, so please put Rogers on standby. But I could see a number of people rolling their eyes when you started talking about security issues, but I just wanted to say, the government has an obligation itself to protect its people, so that is a very interesting space, and I don't want us to get into controversies on this one. They can make a determination what the budget should look like, even if there is no war, so I just wanted to put that in context. But having said that, you mentioned a very important, a couple of important factors, particularly the issues around market linkages, agribusiness, agriculture as a business. I think, Antonio, when I opened the floor, perhaps at some point for just about 2 or 3 minutes, I would expect you to intervene also talking about agriculture as a business and what can be done more practically. But Rogers, can you put Rogers online? Rogers, you're listening into the conversation, and it's a very important conversation, particularly when it comes to the issues around trade. Whatever we're going to do, it's also important to look at the regional dimension, more so that we have the Africa Free Trade Continental Area Agreement and some agreements in the East Africa region. What are some of the best practices? What are some of the opportunities, drawing lessons from countries in the region that we can bring to Uganda in terms of building resilience, in terms of recovery? What are those things? You are listening in to the youth as well. Agriculture is going to be a great aspect of that. How are we going to trade in agriculture? How do you connect somebody here in Uganda to somebody in Ghana, in Nigeria? What needs to be done differently this time to make regional integration, regional cooperation work, but also what would make the Africa Free Trade Continental Area Agreement work for the benefit of the people of the region in terms of recovery and in terms of resilience building? What have we learned?
Now, listening to the previous discussants, they've all talked about the nature of the crisis and the national nature of the crisis. But this crisis is more than just a national crisis. It's a regional crisis.
All protocols
it has affected Eastern now, Africa. Listening to the previous discussants, and this is where the good news comes in. In the next 2 months, January 2021, the CFTA is going to be launched, which Uganda has already ratified. Now, why is this important in the context of the pandemic. We've done the analysis, and what we've seen is that the CFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, can boost industrialization in the region. And I'm going to use the case study of the pharmaceutical industry, which has proved to be critical during this pandemic, to illustrate why we need regional markets to solve some of our problems. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, if you recall, a lot of countries in the West and in Asia stopped exporting some of the drugs they considered critical to the rest of the world. So there was that initial export restriction on exports of pharmaceutical products that fortunately has been solved, but it's just an indicator of how things can go wrong in the case of the pandemic. And then if you look at what's happening with the vaccine development, most of the vaccine development for COVID is taking place outside of Africa. And this has implications for African access to these drugs. So what can Africans, what can Uganda do to make sure that we can boost our own pharmaceutical industry? Now, I'll give a very good example of what the Ugandan government has done to boost the pharmaceutical sector. And this is called, there's an industry called Quality Chemicals, CIPLA. Now, Quality Chemicals was a joint venture between, it was an example of a public-private partnership between the government of Uganda and the private sector. The government of Uganda provided initiatives to CIPLA, and right now CIPLA is exporting. It's not only producing ARVs for Uganda, but it's also exporting ARVs to Southern Africa. So this is an example of an initiative in the pharmaceutical space that has helped drive down costs of drugs. Now, on the African context, UNECA, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, has launched an initiative, the African Pharmaceutical Initiative. And the goal of this initiative is to make sure that we can produce critical drugs in Africa, drive down the cost of production, and make sure that African countries are prepared for the next pandemics. We need to develop our own regional chains, especially in critical sectors like the pharmaceutical sector. We can no longer rely on the rest of the world to provide us with critical drugs. Because as we have seen, whenever there's a problem, whenever there's a crisis, you either get countries shutting off their exports of critical drugs until they can satisfy the domestic markets. So I think this provides, the pharmaceutical industry is a good example of what can be done regionally to deal with this pandemic and future pandemics, and also create jobs. The CFTA is going to create jobs for youth in Africa. We've done some of the analysis we've done, which shows that because the CFTA will allow youth to move across Africa, you will have a Ugandan can go to Ghana and find job opportunities in Ghana, find market opportunities in Ghana. I remember there's a young lady in Nairobi, Kenya, who exports hides and skins to West Africa. And she's doing this she was doing even before the CFTA. So you can, once the CFTA comes into place, such opportunities will be increased within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rogers, but there's a dimension you have not touched on. You talked about partnerships, which is great. But I want to come back to the point around regional value chains, because that's very important. What are some of your perspectives around regional value chains? This is going to be important for us as we look at resilience and recovery for the continent as a whole. How do we position ourselves as an African region for something like that?
I think even with the case of regional value chains, we need regional integration. Because as we were talking about agribusiness, Uganda is the biggest export in East Africa of agriculture goods to the rest of Africa. Now, if we're going to develop agribusiness, develop agricultural products in Uganda, add value to our agricultural products, we're going to need to be able to export them to regional markets. And what we have seen is that it is easier for us to export our manufactured products to African markets. It's very difficult to export your manufactured products to the Western markets. But within Africa, what we have seen from our studies is that regional markets are important for developing our regional value chains. And actually, as COVID has shown us, there's a disruption that is coming to the global value chains. So we need to focus on developing our regional value chains. And Uganda, with its comparative advantage in agriculture, stands a very good chance of expanding its market of agricultural products, processed agricultural products, beyond even the East African market where it is currently concentrated. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the conversation is still on. We're talking about the impact of COVID-19, the socioeconomic dimensions. We're looking at, importantly, the strategies to promote resilience building and also to recover. And we've been hearing conversations from different panelists, from working differently to empowering the youth, women, the private sector providing incentives, and also, importantly, looking at the UNDP 3, which provides the foundation for us to build forward together in the next 5 years as part of the implementation of the Vision 2040. Now, I don't want this to remain a monologue here, and therefore I'll give a chance, maybe about 3 minutes, or so about 5, to those who are listening in, those who are here. I may not be able to connect to those online in the interest of time, and I'm going to come back to the panelists for some final reflections, just to close, because I think the time I had was up to 11 o'clock. Please, if you do speak, please keep it short and sweet and straight to the point. And I'll let the microphone, please ensure it's sanitized. As you pass it around to the next person, it needs to be sanitized. And please keep your mask on, because we are in a public space. Please keep your mask on. We can hear you even if you have your mask on. And Antonio, I'm going to come to you because I want you to touch on the issue around agribusiness and the regional value chains. I think it's a common thread in everything that we are saying, from agro-industrialization to agribusiness to trade, and I think that's a thread that I want you to highlight. I'll take the gentleman, yes. I'll take 4 people and that's it. So please, it's a contribution. Keep it short and sweet. The lady will hold the microphone, yes.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Taha Kasule from Islamic University in Uganda. I want to touch briefly on the issue raised by Miss, I think it is Professor Pamela. When she started talking, she talked about the unemployment problem and how she thinks that this should be handled, and practically talked about the issue of FDI, for example, as a strategy. But maybe you really want to explain further, because as I can understand, the pandemic is global, and where FDI is coming to Uganda, they are also affected, and it is reasonable to assume that they will also be having problems coming to the rest of the world. And maybe something else about stimulating aggregate demand. You talked about the SACCOs, yoga. And do you think that it is not more important for government, for example, to allow the people who are working to have more disposable income by way of tax reductions, so that they can be able to have more disposable income to stimulate the demand from their perspective? Thank you.
So the question is on foreign direct investment, really, FDI for sure. All right, I'll take the lady over there. And
thank you so much. My name is Patience Kemijisha. I work with the Institute for Social Transformation. I'd like to react to the issue of digitization. It came up in two panelists when Maureen and Professor Pamela were discussing. And for me, I'd like to zoom into it's an opportunity for us, the youth and of course Ugandans at large, to embrace technology for business, make more money while using technology. But then how affordable is this technology, especially for people in the informal sector? What is the government going to do to make the internet more affordable so that people can be able to make money while using technology? Thank you so much.
All right, so the question for those of you listening in, how can we make the internet affordable so that we can promote the agenda of digitalization? All right, I have a hand here. Please keep it short and sweet because I'm going to close this one in 5 minutes. And then I take two over there. I don't see any hand here, and then I come to you, Antonio, to close. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I have 2 points. One, in terms of way forward. I think in not having a resilient economy, we need to invest seriously in marketing and quality standards. I think, Pamela, you know very well that our milk is not being sold in Kenya. Our market for eggs is stalling. We lost the market in Tanzania, and now we are building roads in Congo to enable us, trade. This is very serious, and I'm happy that the Minister for Finance is here. We must negotiate markets, especially the regional markets, seriously, because our produce must be sold so that we can be able to grow. The second is to reduce the cost of business. And I go to Stanbic Bank. If I get a loan to produce coffee and you require me to start making payments the next month, just be rest assured I will begin to default immediately. We must do that. The cost of electricity, it is still so high. Pamela, I don't know what we need to do. Power is stuck at Karuma. We can't transmit it to the final consumer. What's wrong? Why can't we ensure that power actually reaches the right consumer to reduce the cost of business? Thank you so much.
All right, 2 questions, and I think you should take note, panelists. One to Emma and also one to you, Pamela. Yes, I'll take the questions around that table. Please keep it short and sweet. Yes, and 1 minute per person if it's possible. Yes.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, as a strategy, that we need to learn to do things differently. And I want to say that whatever will be done here will be done with the context of the governance in this country. And I would like to see a strategy where there must be deliberate effort to reduce public expenditure, especially in the political arena. I would like to see a strategy where we shall differently fight corruption and genuinely. Because whatever you say, as long as these finances go in leakages, as she was saying, then we are not getting anywhere. Finally, because I must be short, I haven't read the report, but surely that COVID has had a devastating impact on the families, on women and girl child. We all know the amount of rapes, defilement, pregnancies, fathers impregnating children. I was involved in all this. And I would like to see a strategy addressing the real empowerment of women in the families. I would like us to focus on the family as a basic institution of a nation, because all these things have been revealed which we didn't know. So I would like to have direct strategies addressed to improvement of the family and empowerment of women. Thank you.
All right, I'm sorry. At some point I have to cut the conversation because I don't know, Maurice, I think I have up to 11. Is that, or you're giving me some 5 extra minutes? All right, let's take the 2 people at the corner over there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Victoria Sekireko from the Uganda Agribusiness Alliance. I would like to attempt to answer the question which the chair put to Pamela. And Pamela, I have got an admission to make. As you were answering, I whispered to my neighbor here that you did not have the answer. That is why you were using so many words. The question was, what do you want UN to do? And my attempt, and I'm glad the government is still here in the form of the ministers, is can the government of Uganda get together with the UN, because the UN has all the technical know-how. The government of Uganda have got the politics, the sociology, and all that, and concentrate your planning and your resources into one area so that we can see at least one area working very well. What example would I give? I would give the example of sustainable nutrition. If we do sustainable nutrition, that will involve all the UN organizations, will involve the local governments, will involve the political top. For as long as we have got sustainable nutrition, our education will not be, we shall not have stunted children. Our education will not be fed, the children will not be fed on only posho and beans. We shall create employment, you name it, we shall have solved it. I thank you.
Much. I will take the last person here, and I come to Antonio. Please keep it short as well. Okay. And we're getting some very good contributions in terms of strategies moving forward.
Thank you so much. Muhammad Mpezamigo, the Vice Chancellor of Kampala International University. I would like to thank the panelists. The only one glaring thing that is missing is the role of educational institutions in the whole of this problem. We know that about 15 million people were affected who are in educational institutions. How do you get us involved, given the fact that we do have both private and public providers in this equation, and the most people who are actually frustrated and who have lost hope, people in educational institutions, both staff and students. And so, how do we get involved, given that we have the cream of our people in the country, people who can be involved in research, and Professor Pamela is from a university setting. So I thought we would have an issue there, and even in the summary, education does not future. Why is this so? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, the Vice Chancellor of Kampala International University. And colleagues, we've been hearing a lot of reflections from the need to enhance governance, to empower educational institutions. We're hearing things around, the energy dimensions of socio-economic impact of COVID, which we need to look into. But I just want to pass the floor now on to you, Antonio Querido of FAO. Because of the really agribusiness dimension, I thought you might want to say just something very small on that. And then I would close the conversation. Revert back to the panel for some responses and some final reflections. Thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. I would like to also thank the panelists. Indeed, agriculture is the sector that I strongly believe that can propel Uganda to middle status in income. We know the potential that the agriculture have in terms of for the economy of Uganda, and that agro-industrialization is seen as the key for the next 5 years. But we have to do things different when it comes to looking at agriculture as a business and how we can employ and engage the youth to really look at the opportunities that exist within agriculture sector as a whole, from the production to the market. Critical aspect to the engagement of youth is to see then how we create a space to incubate some of the agribusiness. It's not feasible just to provide the resource or just provide the technical expertise and then allow the youth to go and to try on their own. Can we create a space where we incubate these business ideas and we ensure that we continue to hold their hands for the sustainability of their own enterprise? We have to do more when it comes to production. We need to organize to ensure that we have sufficient produce for agro-industrialization. We have seen that Uganda, it is the food basket of East Africa, and we have seen an increase in production, but has been at the expense of increasing area, not at the expense of increasing productivity. Just to give you an example, what we're getting at a research station for a maize, we can get at 10 tons per hectare in a research station, but you'd be happy to get 2.5 at a farm level. So there is a huge yield gap in terms of productivity that we need to address. We have the resources that are needed for agro-industrialization. The same when it comes to post-harvest. How we create enough storage, how we create the capacity to preserve the effort of our farmer and to add value on a number of commodities that has been identified. And this country is so blessed when it comes to the resources that we do have to add value. To do that, we need to continue to invest on extension service, to deliver on the technical expertise that farmers will need to transform their business. We need to invest more on research and development, a critical area that will link to some of the aspects related to education, how our institutions look at the opportunities that exist within a value chain to build the skills that are needed for the sector to strive. And of course, critical to all of this is the supply chain. We have to look at the quality of the inputs that comes to this nation and the quality of the inputs that are going to the agriculture sector. Otherwise, we fail to really ensure that we have the quality. And then invest on the standard for us to be competitive, not only here internally, but also looking at the markets abroad, and reduce the cost of doing business, of course, and reduce the cost of money, and negotiate assets within the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement that really opens a wide opportunity for Uganda agriculture sector. We have to stop exporting raw materials, because when we export raw materials, we know full well that the jobs are going with it. Thank you.
Very important reflections from a colleague from FAO. Let's stop exporting jobs. That's what you're saying. I want to dwell on two of the dimensions of the conversation you just brought, helping to incubate youth ideas. I also wanted to say the UN family has this Youth for Business initiative where we have an innovative challenge fund currently ongoing for young people who have ideas, who can be able to get grant resources up to $40,000 to nurture those ideas. We're in partnership with Stambik on that, and they go through afterwards a Stambik incubation, plus other partners are also coming on board now. You also mentioned the need to look at the trade-offs between agriculture and environment. If we want to increase productivity, let's not deforest, for example, to do that. And how do we ensure that we can increase acreage on every land? So, ladies and gentlemen, honorable ministers, excellencies, we are gradually coming to the end of this conversation. We've been talking about strategies to push forward the agenda of recovery and resilience building for our beautiful country, the Pearl of Africa. This morning we have had 5 panelists, Professor Mbabazi, NPA Chair. We've also had Emma Mugisha from Stanbic, Executive Director. We've also had Maureen, who is coming from the Institute of Transformation, I think, Center for Transformation. We've had Musa as well, and we've had a colleague from the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa join us from Addis Ababa online. I just want to take some final reflections from the panelists. I just want those who got questions from the floor to try and respond very quickly, because I think Maurice is looking at me now. And then you also have a moment to say, again, any closing remarks that you have that you think we can take forward as a country together. And then I would wrap up the morning. Thank you. Should we start from you, Emma?
Thank you. So my one question was, we seem to, as a banking industry, seem to have standard products where we lend you money today and you have to start paying next month, and that is not sustainable. I think that it was true for the biggest part, but what is changing now is moving to solutioning for customers as individuals, as opposed to having one fits all kind of solutioning. So what we've done is to try and digitize the salary loans, which are more mundane kind of loans, in order to free up our salespeople to actually sit down with business people and understand their need and make sure they structure the facilities to their needs and to their ability to, and their cycles as well. Because you can't put an agriculture loan as a standard, because every crop has a different cycle, every venture has a different cycle. So yes, we hear you, and it's something that we're working on in terms of sitting with our customers and solutioning for our customers as individuals and as individual businesses, especially on the business side. Then for the ones that we can digitize, we're digitizing so that we can then create that space. But also in terms of parting shots, I think the one thing I started to envision is a partnership where we actually create a marketplace for agriculture for Uganda, where we can all get in, see the price of crops, see the price of seeds, and create a place where there's competition even for input providers and suppliers, so that we can make price discovery a lot better, but also have quality in there, feedback on quality, and provide that information. As my fellow panelists said, people are starting to get into the use of smartphones. So we're going to have to get smartphones further down to everybody so that we can be able to use technology to improve this space. So that would be something I'd love to be part of.
Right, thank you very much, Emma. May I take you, Pamela? Please. I want to thank all the participants and the questions that were presented and the comments made. I think one thing we need to really take back is the fact that COVID is here with us to stay, and certainly everybody has a responsibility to reflect and find what he or she or they can do. Why am I saying this? Because it's not just government that will be able to deal with whether mitigating or building resilience of a country. I think that we need to realize that there will be need to have short-term interventions, medium-term interventions, long-term interventions. In answer quickly to your question regarding the FDI and COVID, how this mix, I did mention that in context of as we attract investment, because we need that investment. I talked about the fact that we need, our goal as UNDP3 is improving livelihoods, dealing with improving household incomes and the quality of life of Ugandans. No country globally has been able to transform itself without industrializing. As a country, we need foreign direct investment, COVID or no COVID. And for us to do this, we need to be deliberate and intentional in ensuring that the kind of investment that we attract is the one that will provide employment for our youth. So we are working proactively with the private sector, with all stakeholders, including the development partners, to ensure that we attract the kind of foreign direct investment that will provide jobs. Mr. Mkunda, I fully agree with you. Market is key, and I'm glad that my brother Inadis has brought this out. The African Continental Free Trade Area is what will galvanize the way we do work on the continent as countries, as Africans. If we are able to put in place clear strategies that will help us operationalize the Continental Free Trade Area, we will expand the market on the continent, enable us to do precisely what we need to do to transform our continent. Governance issues, I agree with you, Madam Miriam Matembe. Empowerment of families, certainly key. Education being key. Research, absolutely. And if you go back to the NDP3, we have clearly and deliberately walked through what do we need to turn around our country. And certainly agro-industrialization is key. But we must prioritize and see how we lay out short-term, medium-term, long-term interventions. And for me, I have decided and agreed that we have a time bomb. We know that we have, as a continent, a flux of our youth. If we do not touch it, it will explode. And we have a very limited window of opportunity for us to create a dividend. So we must deliberately and categorically, as a country, as a continent, as a people, find ways of employing our youth. I thank you. Thank you very much. I can see Musa clapping, so you want to join Musa as well. Basically, that we need to empower the youth, and we are sitting on a time bomb. So Maureen, what do you have to say, particularly from the point of view of women?
Okay. Thank you, Elsa, for moderating the session, and thank you to the panelists. There is a question that patients had risen about the internet. How can we make internet more affordable? because we have been here and we're talking about digitalizing in all the sectors that members have been presenting, but we are forgetting to talk about the internet costs. Because when you look at the internet costs in our country, they are really high. So as we are pushing for digitalization, e-commerce, we should also call in government to look into the reduction of the internet costs. Because that one is not in my mandate to really speak to it, that I'm going to reduce it. It is the government that has to look into it. Then I also wanted to talk about the application that I already presented, the market garden application. Just calling on you, all of you who are here, please download it to keep you safe and to be able to get your fresh groceries from the markets, but also supporting farmers who are out there, because this market garden application is linking the farmers and the suppliers, plus the market women and us, the consumers. So please embrace it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Talking about apps, we also have the Safe Border one that we have with the UN Capital Development Fund. It's UNDP and Jumia. We also have the UNDP Jumia app, which is a vendor app which you can connecting vendors in 7 markets: Bogolobi, Kalewe, Nakawa. 2 online services for the first time in the history of Jumia, and I think for the first time in Africa. And these are some of the innovations that we have been supporting. All right, Musa, you're listening in. I think everybody is really talking about youth empowerment. Any final reflections?
Thank you. Agribusiness is a viable career option for all stakeholders to note. I call upon all stakeholders to use a multi-sectorial approach, especially government agencies. We've seen sometimes government agencies seem to be contradicting on some key issues, and then the youth sit back to wait, and listen, that doesn't sometimes reflect well. Then the government needs to re-engineer its will towards development, should listen to experts. National Development Planning Authority has very brilliant brains. I know some of them, the Professor Pamela Mbabazi, and other fellows who are there, and other people who are there. They have sometimes advised government on key issues. And then probably, I'm not sure whether you take on their recommendations seriously, but also by other experts. Then 3, it's a responsibility of all of us to create jobs for younger people in this country. All of us, let's create jobs for young people, but also participate in development processes of our country. Lastly, I want to thank the government for the relative peace that is prevailing in the country, but we ask you even to do it better. Thank you so much.
I think the energy is going down. A round of applause for the panelists. Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, Resident Coordinator, fellow representatives, ladies and gentlemen, those connected online, thank you very much for watching us. I think I'm just going to sum up very briefly, and we call it an early afternoon, and or early morning, sorry, we're still morning, invite Maurice to take over. We've been having a very important conversation today, colleagues, around the impact of COVID-19 on Uganda. We're moving away, or not only looking at it from a health point of view, but we are looking at the socioeconomic dimensions. We've established the impact on potentially on poverty, where we are looking at poverty potentially increasing between 2 to 8%. We've also talked about the impact on the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly on SDG 1 on poverty eradication, SDG 2 on zero hunger, SDG 3 on health, SDG 5 on gender equality, and SDG 8 on decent jobs. We've also talked about the impact on the informal sector, women, youth, tourism, and many more, so I don't want to go into that. But what is important is that the conversation today has been focusing on how do we build forward better? How do we ensure that we can enhance our recovery, and how can we promote resilience building across board? We've been hearing from the honorable ministers and other colleagues, but also from this distinguished panelists who have shared some reflections with us. We've heard about the need to look at the National Development Plan 3, NDP 3, as a strategic instrument to integrate issues around recovery and resilience building. And I think, Pamela, the issues around the program implementation action plans which would actually break down the NDP3 becomes an important instrument in that regard. We've also heard about the need for us to coordinate efforts, work differently. The panelists have also touched, and together with you, some of the distinguished guests here today around issues around governance, public finance management. We've also heard around issues on green economy, looking at the energy dimensions of things, how can we transmit the energy, but also how do we look at other instruments, solar, biogas digesters, things like the hydro. These are all things we can look into. Agriculture has emerged very strongly in the conversation around agriculture as a business, but also looking at the trade dimensions to it. There's been very important conversations around digitalization. I think if there's one thing that COVID has shown us is the digital disruptions and how do we nurture the ideas that are coming up, but importantly, how do we reduce the cost of infrastructure? And I think I want to say that as a United Nations family, we are also working with the Ministry of ICT, NITA-U, looking at the long-term dimensions to this and how we can support a reduction in terms of cost to this, partnering with the private sector, of course. We've had issues around social protection, protecting the youth, protecting the women, protecting the elderly, persons with disabilities. Importantly, also, we looked at the financial instruments where the private sector would come in. I just also wanted to say that as a United Nations family, we're supporting the government of Uganda to look at an integrated national financing framework, which is much more broad and encompassing, looking at different financial sources, instruments, and mechanisms to support the delivery, the recovery, and the resilience building agenda. And I think I wanted to finally mention that partnership has become very key. We need a multi-sectoral approach, cross-sectoral approach, whole of government, whole of society approaches to addressing this challenge, and importantly, how we build forward better for our beautiful Pearl of Africa. So on that note, let me say it's been an exciting time moderating this panel. My name is Elsie Atefa, and I'm the resident representative of the United Nations Development Program. Thank you very much. You can now take our seats, and over to you,
All right.
Morris.
Before you go, I think, Elsie, we can have a photo here with our panel. Please remain socially distanced. As you do that, another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for this fantastic panel. Elsie, you could come to the middle, since you're the moderator. We'll have you in the middle. Okay. And this was a very socially and gender-sensitive panel. The men are saying it was imbalanced, but this was very... I'll add myself so we can equal this number. All right, photographers, here you go. Ladies and gentlemen, our fantastic panel that did justice to our discussion. And very shortly, we will be having the launch of our report. So you will see quite some movement at the front here. But I wanted to speak to some of the highlights of this conversation, our panel discussion. We can't labor. Thank you very much, Elsie and the team. Please do take your seats. May I invite our team to quickly put together our report that will be officially launched by the ministers and our resident coordinator. All right, and quickly, the panel spoke to something everyone here has consistently discussed, the issue of markets. We did listen to the conversation on innovations and appreciation of digital. A lot of conversations around partnerships. I think Emma from Stanbic was very clear on this. Our very poor savings culture came to the fore when we went into lockdown, with a lot of us wiping out the little savings we had, and also the rationalization of expenditure, government expenditure in the various sectors. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, I really want to thank Elsie and the panel for doing justice to the discussion on our report. I now want to take the pleasure of inviting the Honorable Ministers and our Her Excellency Rosa Malango and Elsie to come forward and officially launch this COVID impact report. If you could make your way. And the various heads of the UN agencies, Laura, Maxime, Savage, Dr. Antonio, please come, UN family. If there's anyone I've left out, I tried to make sure. That's UNICEF, IOM, UN Women, FAO, Uganda, okay? And UNDP, of course. All right, so very shortly, we will be launching the UN report on the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 and forward-looking conversation on response and recovery. Some of us can go on the other side. Yes. And if you're still watching and you're with us online, please use the hashtag COVID-19 impact. COVID-19 impact, or you can also use the hashtag UNUGSDGs month. Those are the hashtags we're using, all right? So, over to you, Your Excellency Rosa, and the ministers. You unveil the report, and do we have the ministers on the other side and Elsie? Yes. One of the ministers? Yes, there you go. Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so we'll cut the tape. There you go. The Honorable Minister will officially cut the tape to launch and officially launch the COVID-19 Impact Report. Thank you very much. We'll have a photo opportunity here so we can capture this moment for our headline papers and for the news. You will also all autograph our report. The blue one, of course, the colors of the UN. Yes, there you go. So we'll have all our UN family members penning their signatures to our report, and also the Honorable Ministers, Honorable Ajedra and the Honorable Karoro Krut, will do the same, that marking the official launch of the COVID-19 Impact Report. And in your takeaway kit that's before you, please note that you will have the highlights of the report. You also have a fact sheet of the same that gives you the key highlights of the social impact of the COVID-19 in Uganda. That's part of your takeaway notes. I also did mention you can find the full report on the UNDP website, ug.undp.org. You will find both an article on the report, the fact sheet, a policy brief on the same, and also the full report, which is also available on the same website. Please do share the highlights therein and use the hashtag COVID-19 impact as you do the same, all right? So we are still having the autographing of our report by our UN family members, and then very shortly I will be inviting Her Excellency Rosa to make closing remarks. All right, that is done. Let's have all of us holding the report. Yes, the photo with the report. At the front, there you go. Please keep our music bed in the background. Thank you. Rosa, please, we still needed more pictures. Please stay for just 2 more minutes. All right, so photographers, as soon as you're done, let me know. I need Rosa to close this. This is TV time, and we're very careful. All right, thank you very much, UN family members and the honorable ministers. If you could take your seats. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. That was the launch of our report. So I now invite Her Excellency Rosa to make closing remarks.
Thank you. I don't have my spray thing here. Honorable ministers, our champions for sustainable development goals in Uganda, dear colleagues of the United Nations system, physically here and online, our beloved development partners, our youth, including the Youth SDG Coalition members who have been following, as well as the youth who spoke so eloquently on the panel today, our colleagues in Addis Ababa, Nairobi, and other parts of the world who have let me know that they're following this launch closely. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a moment to say thank you, but this is a moment also of reflection. On several occasions, I have highlighted the fact that more than 60% of the 3,000 UN staff in Uganda are Ugandan. That means that this beloved report that we have launched today is local content. Congratulations, Uganda. We are particularly humbled and honored to be able to help produce this report, which is a reflection of our role as a trusted partner, an advisor, and an enabler for the government and people of Uganda in your journey to become a middle-income country and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you for your participation. I invite you to read the report, bring it into your work, give us suggestions on how to continue to keep it alive and enrich it, and celebrate the fact that Uganda has its own analysis to decide how to build back better. Thank you for your attention.
All right, that said, I just need to say one more thing, and that really, I am very excited to have been part of this launch, and to the UN family, thank you. Everyone knows that everyone is entitled to their opinion, but not to the facts. And today, we were given the facts. My friend Mukunda, who likes to share numbers, now you have a report to refer to and say the UN family says, and this is where we need to go. So thank you to the UN family. We have the data, and it's up to us to now look at the data and see what to do better. We love the recommendations. I think that's where we begin. And to you, the honorable ministers who are here, thank you for what you've done for this country and the people of Uganda amidst this crisis. We will overcome. And all of you watching, thank you very much. Continue with the conversation using the hashtag COVID-19 impact. Also use the UN SDGs UG hashtag. We will be happy to continue this conversation offline. We thank you all. God bless and good morning.